Hello, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the last video on bacterial infections. Continuing the series with part 2 today. My hope is, if time allows, that we can go through 4 different types of bacteria. Really 2 that are less specific, more kind of a generalized ones. I'm going to be dealing with necrotizing fasciitis, strep throat, anthrax, and gas gangrene. That being said, viewer discretion is advised. In putting this together, there are a number of pictures that I would have loved to have added, but I know some of you out there are a little sensitive to photos and didn't want to disturb anybody too badly. This first one, necrotizing fasciitis, when looking it up, I didn't actually vomit, but there's some pictures that made me a little queasy, so be careful if you decide to Google. There are some pretty nasty pictures out there. These are nasty diseases. That being said, let us begin necrotizing fasciitis. This is actually the tamest photo I could find. Necrotizing fasciitis is a general term. Necrotizing here, it's death of, right? And the fasciitis here, it's connective tissue. So there are a wide range of bacterial causes for this particular disease. I'm highlighting this one as pyogenes. It's gram-positive round bacteria. We haven't had too many round bacteria that we talked about. But this particular one also is involved in another disease, but I think it's the most common that you find with necrotizing fasciitis. So once it gets in the wound, you've got to have it, you have a lesion or something to cut, you can see here, and it's going to get in the wound. It's got a toxin that is produces, one's called the super antigen, and then it has a separate exotoxin, some of them that will also be active. The super antigen causes your immune system to overreact, releasing those cytokines, kind of like we're talking about with sepsis and toxic shock syndrome. And I'm going to deal with this again in the next bacterial disease. But this exotoxin, what it does is it restricts blood supply to the area, the affected area, essentially cutting it off from the body's circulatory system, which then limits what you can do to cure it. As if you try antibiotics and this area has been cut off, the antibiotics can't reach there. And once it's been cut off, the immune response can't go there, and you're going to have tissue destruction based on the lack of nutrients, but also the enzymes there will be destroying some of the cells from this toxin. Necrotizing fasciitis or flesh-eating bacteria, not too common, but it needs to be treated rapidly, otherwise it can lead to serious complications, sometimes loss of limb. You can see the tissue here has just been destroyed, and it will destroy tissue down to the bone. All right, next one, not as bad, but similar. Strep throat, very common disease. It is caused mainly by the same one that we had with I highlighted here as pyogenes, and it's a gram-positive round bacteria. Symptoms there would be the sore throat, the fever, sometimes vomiting. Strep throat on its own, antibiotics will work, but if left untreated, sometimes it can lead to heart, kidney damage. So you want to get that treated quickly. I had a picture up earlier that I took away of someone's tonsils with the white spots, but I'm trying to be a little bit sensitive to some of you guys and what you see. But we'll get this sometimes in our house, the sore throat, viral or bacteria. You get the white spots in the back, that's going to be a bacterial infection with antibiotics. One other type of related to strep throat, scarlet fever. Scarlet fever, same bacteria, same thing that's happening. You end up, but with scarlet fever, you end up with a rash over the body, and that is due to that super antigen toxin. Right, and what the rash is, again, you're like an allergic response in relation to this bacteria, but it's being caused by this toxin, this antigen, super antigen toxin, which is causing, once it gets in the cells, it causes those cells to overproduce these molecules that is going to cause your body to have an overactive immune response to it, and that causes the rash. It can lead to, again, sepsis and toxic shock syndrome, but that's strep throat. I'm sure most of you have had it. I had it every year from first grade on up through high school. Fun stuff. I think even had scarlet fever once. The third bacteria I want to highlight today is anthrax. Anthrax got popular after 2001 with the mailings of the anthrax spores to different people. And anthrax is it's a gram-positive rod, and it is an endospore. It's a fairly large endospore, and I want to highlight a picture of it for you here. But anthrax, one thing that is kind of left out is it's ubiquitous in soil. Right? It is everywhere in soil. If you go outside, you might find these spores. Usually they're harmless. Right? Usually they're harmless. Here is a picture of somebody who's had a cut, and the spores got in there and was able to do some damage. Farmers and field workers will get anthrax in their skin, and it's not lethal. Usually, it doesn't even lead to the loss of a limb, but it can be cured pretty easily. That's probably the most common form of it. But there are those two forms of anthrax. You have the cutaneous or the skin version, where it gets in a lesion and then will proliferate once it's inside. And you have the lung form, among others. And I wanted to highlight this because with the anthrax attacks, this was the form that was talked about. In order for it to be effective in killing you, it has to be 1 to 5 microns large, which is a small subset of actual anthrax. In order to get this lung version of it to the right size, it has to be centrifuged and filtered, and it's an expensive process to get it to the right size. But the toxin itself for both of these has 2 parts, and once it does get in, it will kind of germinate and start growing and proliferating, and waiting for your body to do its thing. All right, so this toxin that is there has 2 parts to it. One, the first part gets to the cell surface, and it attaches to the cell surface and then allows the other parts to get into the cell. The second part of the toxin, once it's in the cell, leads to disruption in the cell signaling pathway, which leads to swelling or edema, and then ultimately to the cell being destroyed. The cell itself will signal for itself to be destroyed. It's called apoptosis. So the cell itself in that area is being destroyed. One last thought on this: the lung version of anthrax is that the reason it needs to be this small, 1 to 5 microns large, is in order for it to get into the alveoli, which it will then proliferate inside the alveoli, and then those cells will die, and then you'll be left without lungs to breathe. Finally, and again, I'm getting long here, the last one, another kind of gross one if you go looking for it online, is a general one is gas gangrene. Gas gangrene is a general term for a number of bacteria that can cause this. They are anaerobic, for the most part, bacteria. The most common that I've found is C. perfringens, gram-positive bacillus. And it causes myonecrosis, which is muscle death, destroying muscle tissue, as opposed to necrotizing fasciitis, which is destroying the connective tissue. Gas gangrene bacteria are going to be targeting the muscle tissue. It works. The toxin itself works similarly to some of the other ones that we've talked about. It reduces the blood supply In this case, the blood supply loss is destroying the tissue. But another thing to point out with the gas gangrene, it's called gas for a reason, as these anaerobic bacteria are growing and making energy, they're producing gas. And this is a picture of muscle tissue with the spaces between them that have been filled with gas, or the gas is filling in there, causing pressure, and causing some of that tissue to separate. And I highlighted this picture because it has the nice bubble. There's gas forming in there, and that's what's causing the bubble there. And gas gangrene also has a particular smell. That gas can have a particular smell. The C. perfringens is actually also one of the most common bacteria involved in food poisoning. Not causing your intestines necessarily to necrotize, but food poisoning is a common form of it is from that bacteria. Also, I found this interesting. Gas gangrene causes a condition called, I can't actually read my handwriting anymore, but it's a condition where you get crackling and popping noise under the skin because of the gas being produced. All right, to recap, gas gangrene, gas reduction. The toxin causes the blood supply to reduce the area, limiting your immune response, cutting off nutrients and supplies to the tissue. Tissue gets destroyed. Bacteria is eaten. It's loving life, producing gas and causing damage and possible death. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. A little bit grosser today. I will probably do a third one tomorrow. Not quite as intense as this one, but I'm enjoying it. Hopefully you are too. Hopefully you learned something today. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you. Or I won't see you. You'll hear from me tomorrow.